Welcome to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Hour number 2 of the VSiN Weekend Morning Line. I'm your host, Tim Murray, live from the Circa Sportsbook in downtown Las Vegas, Nevada. We'll head to San Antonio in less than 15 minutes. We'll catch up with Coach Matt McCall doing work with the Field of 68 as well as some NBC sports work. And then Jonathan Von Tobel, a gentleman who is in second place in the Circa College Hoops Challenge. We'll get his picks and also curious his thoughts on what we continue to see from the Golden State Warriors. Another win, another cover for the Warriors last night. They are now 20-2 when Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry are in the lineup together. Steph going for 36 last night as the Warriors get that win. And right now, the Western Conference is just kind of jumbled together outside of Oklahoma City and Houston. 3 through 8 are being separated by 2 games. Easy for me to say. Spit it out there, Tim. So we will talk to JVT coming up here in just a little bit. But, of course, the Final Four is here tonight. Yes, it is 4-1 seeds. First time since 2008, just the second time in history. We just heard from Paul Stone. He likes Houston. He said he leaned over in Auburn, Florida. By the way, the most consensus selection in the contest is actually the under 160.5. Now, is there part of that a little game theory in the sense that we got to select it at 160.5? The market now sitting at 160, the couple 159.5s out there. I can't speak for the other 7 folks part of this contest, but I was debating between taking the points with Auburn and the under and ultimately landed on the under here. A little bit of an adjustment from what we saw in February when this total was 155. Now, worth noting, 171 points were scored when Florida and Auburn played each other back in February, a final of 90-81 down there in the jungle. So my selections, by the way, for today, Houston plus the 5. That is my best bet. And in Florida, Auburn under 160.5. It is worth noting, I did play first half under 76.5 earlier this week. Talked about that on VSiN Primetime. I do wonder if this game gets off to a bit of a slow start. But I thought it was a fair point by Paul regarding the sight lines and the success that teams had, specifically Villanova in 2018, shooting inside the Alamo Dome. So is that something that's maybe a little bit overlooked or overblown, I should say, when it comes to the totals inside the Alamo Dome? Couple little notes here of the 4 teams and how they fared so far against the spread in the NCAA tournament. Duke, 3-1 ATS. Their lone non-cover was the win over Arizona, 100-93 in the Sweet 16. Obviously took care of business and then some against Alabama in the Elite 8, winning 85-65. Houston, 2-1-1 ATS, and I know JVT has talked about it. That was a rather challenging push if you had the Houston Cougars in that spot, as they were controlling the Gonzaga game pretty much the whole night, and then kind of took their foot off the gas. Gonzaga started to make some buckets, did not cover against Purdue, and then easily covered in the win over Tennessee. So 2-1-1 ATS are the Houston Cougars. Auburn, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I know there's a lot of discussion about how much this team has struggled, and you're fair to an extent. 1-3 straight up to close out the regular season. Did not cover in the first round against Alabama State. They've actually covered 3 straight games here, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen. 3-1 is where they sit from an ATS standpoint. Now, not all covers are made equal, right? Down at the half against Creighton, blew them out in the second half, trailed by 9 against Michigan, went on a 20-2 run, and then really kept Michigan State, I'll say this, at arm's length the entire time. And believe it or not, and this is a little tongue-in-cheek, I get it, Florida, the unbeatable Florida Gators, they're just 1-3 ATS. And Will Hill, who is in on Florida, did make mention of this when you talk about their best game this year, or this tournament, was certainly against Maryland. And you could poke holes in everything. You could make cases every which way. But is it worth noting that Kevin Willard and the disastrous decision, I wouldn't say disastrous decision, just the way he handled leaving Maryland that whole week, was that a distraction? Maybe. But Florida also deserves credit for taking over the second half, running away, and hiding against the Terps. But that's their only cover. They did not cover against Texas Tech, even though, boy, did that get a little sweaty late in that one. And they did not cover against UConn. They did not cover in their opening round win against Norfolk State when their coach infamously said, "I told you we'd cover." As for totals, Florida 4-0 to the over. Duke 3-1 to the over. Houston 3-1 to the under. And Auburn 3-1 to the under. More picks coming up for you. Jonathan Von Tobel, bottom of the hour. Matt McCall, Coach Matt McCall, most recently with UMass. He will join the program here in about 10 minutes. But let's hear from some of the key cogs here later on tonight. No one bigger in the sport right now than Cooper Flagg, the presumptive number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft, likely going to win every National Player of the Year award. Just yesterday was awarded the AP Player of the Year. Inevitably, I think will win the Wooden Award. But Cooper Flagg giving his thoughts on his competition here this evening, the Houston Cougars.
You have to give them a lot of credit for what they've been able to do all year long with the pressure and the effort that they play with every single night. I think that's the biggest thing that from watching all the film and whatnot, just seeing the amount of effort and pressure they're able to put on teams is the biggest thing that I've seen so far.
Cooper Flagg against Alabama, all things being equal, he was still pretty darn good. But for Cooper Flagg and the level that we've seen him play at, held in check relatively against Alabama, but when that happens, Con Knippel stepped up with a 25-5 game, and we've had 2 freshmen for Duke in this NCAA tournament. Flagg and Knippel both have 25-5 games, but I am very intrigued to see how Cooper Flagg performs here tonight. Obviously, he is, in my opinion, and I think pretty much everyone else's opinion, without a doubt, the most talented player in college basketball, and I was asking the question, he's the best pro prospect in college since ... I don't know the answer because he's better than Zion Williamson was as a prospect. He's more complete. Now, Zion with the explosiveness, the athleticism, certainly I think has an edge there, but all around, I think if Cooper Flagg and Zion were in the same draft class, I would say Cooper Flagg would probably be the number 1 overall pick. Now, I'm not talking about Victor Wembanyama or LeBron or anything like that, but I'd be curious to know from an NBA draft standpoint where he stacks up from a true college prospect, where he is over the last, let's call it, 25 years as a pure prospect who played collegiately. But Cooper Flagg, the expectation for him tonight, obviously people expecting him to take charge, plus 125 for him to lead the game in scoring. I actually think, and we'll dive into the props a little bit later, but if you were to take a little bit of a flyer, LJ Cryer plus 350, I think Uzan or Knippel to lead the game in scoring at Knippel 5-1, Uzan at 9-1. Kind of interesting looks because LJ Cryer, I'll say this, at his size, just 6'1", I do have some concerns about how much success he'll have against the rangy, long defenders that the Duke Blue Devils have. So right now, Duke, a 5-point favorite over at VSiN.com, where you can check out our up-to-date betting splits. 70% of the bets on the Duke Blue Devils laying the 5, 75% of the money courtesy of DraftKings on the Duke Blue Devils. Earlier in the day, of course, we get Florida and Auburn. Todd Golden has done a remarkable job with this Florida Gators team, and give him a lot of credit for the end-of-game execution, not only from his players hitting the big threes. Clayton, that step-back three still will be a thing that is remembered for a long time, I imagine, down in Gainesville, but fouling down to get the 1-and-1 opportunities that Texas Tech missed both of. So now, Todd Golden and this Florida Gators team already snapped a big old win streak from the Auburn Tigers back on February 8th, a 14-game winning streak. His thoughts on the Auburn Tigers here this evening.
Our teams know each other really well at this point. We're going to show these guys what we call our keys and personnel probably 3 more times before the ball goes in the air. And I would probably venture to guess that Will could tell you player by player right now the tendencies that each of these Auburn players have and what they like to run, whether it's in the half court or out of bounds or on the sideline. So, that's more of just like us as coaches, like kind of covering our butts and making sure we can say, hey, you were prepared, to do these things. But we got to play hard. We got to defend well. We got to be physical. We have to rebound well. We got to be strong with the ball and take care of it. and just do the things that we've done all year to make us really, really consistent. And the great thing is we have shot makers on our team, and at the end of the day, you got to make shots to win the game.
They sure do. Walter Clayton Jr. is definitely a shot maker. That dude is a bucket getter, and one of the cool things about this Final Four, I know, no Cinderella. Well, I think it's kind of fascinating that the two of the best three players in the Final Four both were at mid-majors not too long ago. Broome was at Morehead State. Clayton was at Iona. Let's hear from the Auburn Tigers side of things. I'll tell you what, we've played a bunch of Dylan Cardwell clips. This dude's a great soundbite, and he gave us his thoughts on preparing for those Florida Gators.
We don't really go into games saying, hey, this is an elimination game. You can't win a game like that. What we do is we segment our games. We just try to be present, be where our feet are, and just like I said, just focus on the game, things that we can control. Like I said, we can't control what a ref calls, but just making sure we're primed to play and ready to play. It's no different than in this regular season. We've had the craziest non-conference, I think, or just craziest schedule in scheduling history, and we have been primed for this position. We're primed for the opportunity that's in front of us, and it's no different than any other game we played. We don't address the elephant in the room as far as, hey, this is an elimination game. I feel like every game that we played is an elimination game. We played in Maui. We played at Houston. Every game we played at Duke. We played Alabama. We played all these crazy quad one games. Every game that we played, it was a must-win game for us, and this is just no different.
There's no doubt Dylan Cardwell and the Auburn Tigers have played every team in the Final Four. They went to Duke. They beat Houston in the infamous plane flight situation game, and then played Florida back on February 8th. Hey, folks, just a reminder, you can take VSiN wherever you go with the VSiN Watch App. You can watch and listen to us. You can check out show replays. Download the VSiN Watch App wherever you get your apps. Google Play Store, Apple App Store. We head to San Antonio and we talk to Coach Matt McCall next here on VSiN.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability. ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
We keep it rolling here on a Saturday morning. I don't know, folks. I think I try to bring the excitement every day on the network, but today there's just something about it. I am so fired up for this Final Four. I don't care about the stupid narrative, oh, we got no Cinderella. Yeah, we got the 4 best teams, and historically speaking, per Ken Pom, these are 4 of the best 10 teams that we've seen in college basketball since his website came into existence in the late 90s. So let's enjoy it. Hopefully we get some great games. And I know a gentleman who will be breaking these games down on SiriusXM channel 84 later today. Friend of the program, former UT Chattanooga and UMass coach. It is Matt McCall who joins us right now, courtesy of our progressive guest line. Coach, you once upon a time were a Cinderella story, right? Chattanooga, the Mocs. Shout to your former team. And
shout out to the Mocs, NIT champs.
Woo.
Let's go.
What a crazy game.
What a year.
Man, what a game finish. I mean, you feel for the young man who missed the bucket at the end, but that's the nature of the beast. A hell of a game there at Hinkle earlier this week. But I got to ask you, as someone who, worked your way up from UT Chattanooga to UMass, and now you're one of us in the media field. What's your take on this Cinderella discussion? Because I know you talked about, I'm sure, on the college sports station over on SiriusXM. I could not be more excited for this Final Four. Where are you on the level of excitement with all 1 seeds being there in San Antonio?
You know what? I'm with you 100%. Just in terms of look, like we've got the 4 best teams here. And the 4 best teams essentially throughout the course of a college basketball season, and we get to watch them, tip it up today at 5-10. We're going to get Cinderella again. This whole narrative that it's over, we'll never get it again. Oh my gosh, maybe we don't get a VCU that goes from the first 4 in all the way to the Final Four. Maybe we don't get a Wichita State or an FAU get to the Final Four, but we'll get some upsets. We'll have some great games. and this narrative of, it's over. I just don't believe that. I think that we've got the 4 best teams here, and we're going to get some great basketball games starting at 5:10 with Florida and Auburn.
Yep. And
it's interesting. Rick Pitino is out here, and he got, the AP Coach of the Year alongside Bruce Pearl yesterday, and he even said it. He's like, look, I can make a case for each one of these teams on why they're going to win the national championship on Monday night. It's almost impossible to pick who's going to do it and who's going to cut the nets down because of how good all 4 of them are. I hope we get great games. I hope we can maybe even throw a buzzer beater in there, some excitement. But it's going to be a lot of fun today, and look forward to being in the building.
Yeah, we get shades of a little Jalen Suggs, a little bank-in 3 at the buzzer. I'd be cool with that if we get something like that. Auburn and Florida first up. Matt McCall joining us here, courtesy of our progressive guest line. You can catch him on College Sports Radio Channel 84 later on today from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Hey, Coach Broome, John A. Broome, obviously he's probably going to be runner-up in almost every National Player of the Year award. Might win one or two, but where do you believe he is from a health standpoint? We played the clip earlier in the show. I'm fine. I'm good to go. But you're a coach. You see how he warmed up. You saw the injury. Where do you think Broome is from an effectiveness standpoint come tonight for the Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, I trust his word, and we got a chance to sit down and talk to him a little bit yesterday. I think he was a little bit fatigued with all the microphones being shoved in his face. And there was a few one-word answers because that's what everybody wanted to talk about. But look, man, this is the Final Four. I know the injury didn't look great the other night, but eventually your adrenaline's going to take over. When you get into that arena yesterday for your open practice and you see, the fans that are in there cheering for you every time you hop up and dunk or drill 3, and then you're going to get in there today, whatever ailments anybody's having up to this point in time in the season, that adrenaline kicks in, and you can start to get healthy come Tuesday once this whole thing's over. So I agree with him. I think he's ready to go. I'd be shocked if he's not, and that makes Auburn obviously that much more dangerous. So I fully predict him to be out there in the lineup.
Matt McCall joining us courtesy of our progressive guest line. Now, it is worth noting, look, we all went to somewhere for college. You just happened to go to Florida. So there might be a little bias there, but I trust your professional expertise here when you look at this game. How does Auburn beat Florida, and how does Florida beat Auburn, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think Florida has to continue to do what they do. They have the superstar in Walter Clayton Jr., but he's also unselfish. And, he plays the game the right way. He doesn't try to force it, and he plays with a calmness about him that makes him extremely dangerous. I think Florida has to be unselfish. They play with great pace. They want to play really, really fast. They're not an overly complicated team on the offensive end of the floor, and they've got a superstar who plays the game the right way. So I think for Florida, it's obviously, look, we have to do what we've done to get us here. I don't think Florida has played great this entire tournament. I don't think they've played up to their potential, which to me makes them scary good. So, the X factors, Elijah Martin, Will Richard has been good. There's been times that everyone on this team, you look what Thomas Houck did for him the other day. So, I think Florida has to defend. They have to defend at a high level. What are they going to do? How are they going to handle Broome? I think is another big key for the Gators in this matchup. But do what they've done. And then for Auburn, the reason I give the edge to Florida, it has nothing to do with my where my degree is from or the fact that I worked there for 11 years. I can assure you of that. It has everything to do with, are they going to move it? Are they going to share it? Are they going to pass the basketball? Because at times they have questionable shot selection. And that's what makes them really good because their players are so talented to be able to make those shots, but they're not always great ones. And I think if they come down and move the floor, an extra pass and find the open man and run Coach Pearl's offense, then they're dangerous. When they turn it into a one-on-one game, yes, they have great one-on-one individual talent, but the floor sticks, and they can become a little bit selfish. So I think biggest key for Auburn, play the game the right way, play the game unselfishly, and if they do that, then they can knock off the Gators.
Matt McCall joining us here, courtesy of our progressive guest line. He's down there in San Antonio, and you could hear him on the Sirius XM Channel 84 College Sports Radio coming up a little bit later on today. Also does some work with our friends over at Field of 68. All right, let's get to the nightcap, the game that, look, I'm excited for Florida-Auburn. Don't get me wrong, but this is the game, Coach. I am so geeked up for this one. Houston and Duke, you've got the superstars there for Duke. You've got this kind of grizzled veteran squad there at Houston. As crazy as it sounds, it does feel like for a team that is number 1 per Bart Torvik, number 2 per Ken Pom, are the Houston Cougars getting a little bit slept on because Duke is playing so exceptionally well right now?
I think they are, but I also think there's something to be said about, when you play against this Houston team, the only way you're going to be able to knock them off is if you have elite level playmakers. And what I mean by that, they want to make you have to play out of double teams and just go play ball. And a lot of teams can get intimidated by that. When they're trapping ball screens and they're rotating out of those traps, this is not a play calling game. You're not running actions to attack this defense. You got to just go out there and hoop. You got to go out there and make plays. You got to keep the ball in the alley and hope that you can beat some of those rotations. And there's no team in the country that has more playmakers than the Duke Blue Devils. Their size, their athleticism. I just think with them, how Houston plays on defense really plays into Duke's hands. So, I don't think we're sleeping on Houston by any means, but I think that defense, because of Duke's talent level out there on the floor, look, if Proctor's getting trapped in a pick and roll, who's he throwing it to? The best player in the country. And when the best player in the country gets to catch it and go, he's going to catch it and go, and there's nobody better in the country at making a one-on-one move than Cooper Flagg.
We saw this Duke defense really stifle Alabama, and you could say some of it was regression. I think a lot of it had to do with the length that you alluded to with this Duke defense. Everyone's 6'6" or longer for this defense. Do you have concerns about the effectiveness of L.J. Cryer here tonight, Coach? Because Mark Sears really struggled against that length. Does L.J. Cryer have similar issues tonight against the Duke defenders?
Yeah, if you wanted to ask my biggest concern about Houston, it's not necessarily, Duke's playmakers. It's more has to do with, can Houston score enough points to keep up with Duke? That is my biggest issue. That is my concern. To your point, you look at that Alabama team, one of the best offensive teams in the entire country. That's where they struggled. So can Houston score enough points to keep up with Duke? I think that'll be something to pay attention to in the matchup.
All right, before I let you run, I think you've hinted at it. You've got a Florida-Duke national championship game come Monday night?
I got a Florida-Duke national championship game, and what a battle that would be, and that'd be really, really fun to watch. I'm hoping we get it. Look, any of these 4 teams, I don't care who gets to Monday. Obviously, I care a little bit who gets to Monday night. But I think if anybody gets there, man, whoever it is, we're going to have a battle. And like I said, I hope we get one of those buzzer beaters.
Coach, always appreciate your insight. Enjoy the time down there.
Appreciate you guys.
There he is, Matt McCall, joining us courtesy of our Progressive guest line. He is a Florida. I liked his answer there. He goes, I don't care. And then he said, I do care a little bit. That's fair. Everyone went to college somewhere. He worked on that Florida staff for many, many years. So appreciate his insight there, courtesy of our Progressive guest line. Hey, just a reminder, if you want to check out the betting splits for tonight's Final Four, we'll become a VSiN Pro subscriber. Right now, we've got a special going on. You can get your VSiN Pro subscription through August 1st for just $59. VSiN.com/subscribe. Jonathan Von Tobel, his best bets, coming up next.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
Continue to get you ready for the Final Four tonight. Auburn and Florida, Houston and Duke. All 4 1 seeds in the Final Four. And can you honestly look at those 4 teams and say, I could see any one of those teams winning the national championship? I actually could. I could see Auburn winning tonight, and if they get a matchup against a Houston team, I think they could win that title. I do wonder, Auburn against Duke, that one would make me maybe a little concerned, but I think Florida could beat either Duke or Houston, and I think Houston could beat either of Auburn or Florida. So, yes, at this point, I think all 4 teams very well could win the national championship. And you might be thinking, well, of course, they're in the Final Four. Of course, it's a different world, man, when you get down to the Final Four. Look, 2006, George Mason had 0 chance to win the national championship. Now, you think back to Butler, the team in, 2010 with the Gordon Hayward shot. They had a shot. They actually literally had a shot there from Gordon Hayward that went off the front rim. Maybe would have been the greatest ending to an NCAA championship game ever. I still believe the Chris Jenkins 3, which happened a little bit later for the championship. Great call by Jim Nance. That's the best finish we've ever seen in a national championship game. God, what a play. The pitch back, step into it. I just, for a moment, just think about it. If anyone's ever done that in the backyard, counted the 3-2-1 down, let her fly, good Lord. The feeling that must have felt like out of Jenkins' hands to know, oh yeah, this is going in. But that game, Villanova, UNC, 2016, what a game it was, and what a finish it was. And maybe we get it. Maybe we get it. You know, here's the optimistic Tim, eternal optimist in me. Maybe we get some dogs barking. Maybe. We didn't see it last night on the women's side of things, did we? As underdogs in Texas and underdogs in UCLA did not work out all that well. We'll get more thoughts on the Women's National Championship a little bit more tomorrow, as that game will tip off at 3 p.m. Eastern. Right now, UConn is a 7-point favorite. Believe it or not, the Huskies have not won the national title in 9 years. You know, Gino Auriemma is 11-1 all time in the national championship. That is just outrageous. 11-1 all time in the national championship game. So we will get a showdown tomorrow between South Carolina and UConn. But first up, we got the Final Four tonight, of course, as Duke and Houston, and first will be Florida and Auburn. But I put out a couple tweets earlier this week. I was curious. I'm like, Houston, I don't remember them being a dog all that much. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, the best underdog team in the country this year, the Houston Cougars, because they went 1-0. That's like the trivia question that I like to tell people. Did you know that in 2005, 2006, I led the nation in field goal percentage? That is a fact. I went 1 for 1, 100%. You didn't say there was a stipulation on how many shots you put up. No one was better than 100% back in 05, 06. Just saying. 1 for 1 from the field, baby. But yes, let's get serious here. Houston has been an underdog one time this year, and they were not an underdog once last year or the year prior. So over the last 3 years, the best cover team as an underdog, the Houston Cougars, 1-0. Earlier this year, they were a dog at Fog Allen. They won the game in double overtime, 92-86. So Houston, not used to this role all that often. It is worth noting, though, the last time we saw the Houston Cougars as a 5-point dog was in 2021 in the Final Four. It did not go well. The Baylor Bears smoked the Houston Cougars 78-59. So, every argument has a different side, and I thought it was fascinating the sense that you've got a Duke team here, or excuse me, a Houston team here that does feel like they are a bit on sale, right? You look at Ken Pom. Ken Pom has Duke as a 2-point favorite. You look at Bart Torvik. I believe that he has Houston as a 1-point favorite. But as we've discussed on the show, and you heard from Will Hill in hour number 1, he is ultimately on Duke in our Circa contest. Do you want to get in front of this Duke freight train? Is this UConn from last year, who not only won every game in the NCAA tournament, but covered every game? Now, Duke has not covered every game. They did not cover against Arizona. And Houston, 2-1-1 ATS. How about this interesting nugget? Because Houston, I thought, got the toughest draw out of any one in this regard. Their 8-9 matchup, which ultimately was Gonzaga, was the toughest 8 seed that you could have faced. Gonzaga, top 10 in the country, in Ken Pom, I thought should have been a 7, maybe even a 6, ultimately land on the 8 line. And you looked at the point spreads for all the other games. Like Duke was a 12-point favorite against Baylor, ran away and hid ultimately. And for Houston, I mean, they went off, as a 5-point favorite against Gonzaga? And they ultimately pushed that number. And then you go to Indianapolis, where you're playing a true road game, albeit in a football stadium. I do think if that was at, Gainbridge Fieldhouse? I think that's where the Pacers play. If it was there, I think it would have been a bigger advantage for Purdue. I do think, I don't want to say lucked, but Houston maybe was a bit fortunate that the Indiana State Championships were going on at that time, and they could not play inside the Pacers arena. But I do all that to say, Evan Abrams, who was on VSiN Primetime earlier this week, had this unique nugget, and John Ewing tweeted it out, which is Houston will be the 9th team in the last 60 years to play in the Final Four in their home state. 7 of the previous 8 teams won a Final Four game. Look, trends can be friends. They can also just kind of be fun to look at. I know it's first up, and Florida Auburn might end up being the best game. There's something about this Houston Duke game that just intrigues me to no end. When you look at a Duke team that seems to be hitting its stride with elite playmaker after elite playmaker, you see how good they are defensively. And I think that's something that was overlooked most of the year because they played in a crappy conference in the ACC. And don't give me this nonsense, well, Duke's going to win the national championship. ACC's not that bad. Yes, it is. It's a terrible conference this year. Not saying forever. It's not a good conference. ACC, Duke's awesome. ACC, not so awesome. I was just thinking about a Jim Gaffigan bit where he's like, fruit, great. Cake, fruit, good. Cake, great. Fruit cake, nasty crap. It's kind of what the ACC is, but Duke is great. And Duke is playing at an elite level. You've got the number 1 player in the country in Cooper Flagg. You've got Con Knippel, who can step up. He can be, he's more badass than Robin. No offense to Robin, even though I guess it was technically offense to Robin. But he could be a really good Robin. And then the guy that fascinates me the most is Malawak, who's 7'2", who's going to be a lottery pick. The dude can move laterally with guards defensively. You saw it against Alabama. But then you've got this Houston team that is littered with veterans, guys that were playing just a year ago in that Elite Eight Sweet 16, when they had a 6-point lead against Duke, and they saw their leader in Jamal Shed go down. L.J. Cryer, I know he started at Baylor, but this is a guy that's been around. He was on that Houston team a year ago. You look at Jaywan Roberts, who's been there for 5 years. This is a veteran. These are some grown-ass men on Houston. Now, Duke's got some big boys too. Let's not pretend that they don't. But you've got a guy like Joseph Tugler, who is just a menace defensively. Are they going to throw him on Cooper Flagg? So do we look at Cooper Flagg, maybe unders here? Do you get another remarkable shooting performance from Milos Uzan, who was the saving grace for this Houston team in the Sweet 16? One of the few pieces that was not on this roster a year ago. Look, I bring up revenge all the time when it comes to college football, college basketball, especially in the regular season. I don't look at today as something from a revenge standpoint for Houston. Yes, they lost a year ago in the Sweet 16. Come on now. You're motivated. You're in the Final Four. Like, what are we doing here? If Houston wins, it's not because they needed extra motivation from last year's loss. And then the question I'd be curious to kind of throw at you. How would you rank the coaches in the Final Four? Because Kelvin Sampson obviously is the most experienced, but you've kind of got these young bucks in Shire and Golden who seem to be that, that cutting edge, that next level, some of the unique perspectives, the way they go at it. I don't see a glaring advantage from a coaching standpoint, but if push came to shove and you said you could get one of those 4 coaches to coach one game for you, I probably would go with Kelvin Sampson. So I'm in on Houston. Give me the points. And I do think, we'll talk to Chuck Esposito about this in the final hour of the program, I do think you wait. Maybe you get a 5.5. I doubt we get a 6, but we'll see if the dog will be barking with the Houston Cougars late night tonight against the Duke Blue Devils. Jonathan Von Tobel, he's got his technologically things figured out. He's going to join us next.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
We keep it rolling here on a Final Four Saturday. I'm your host, Tim Murray, live from the Circus Sportsbook in downtown Las Vegas, the VSiN Weekend Morning Line. You can catch it every Saturday and Sunday at 10 a.m. And during the week, you can catch me on VSiN Primetime with our next guest, Jonathan Von Tobel, who joins us courtesy of our progressive guest line. JVT currently sitting in second place in the Circa College Hoops Challenge, and he is in striking distance of Paul Stone. As we talked to Paul, JVT, earlier in the show, and you guys have some differing opinions, which is beautiful. So we have a real shot for you to jump up to number one. So let's get into your plays here. And JVT is 26-19-2, best bets 5-3, 29.5 points. And your best bet, this is a team that you've been rolling with all throughout the tournament. You have a future on them. You've got a nice little free roll as well. You have been grinding your teeth all week, knowing that, anticipating the worst, but you are backing your boys, War Damn Eagle, here as your best bet.
Yeah, Humans pointed this out to me yesterday to add to everything that I have riding on this Auburn team. Tim, if you go through the tiebreakers, my champion is Auburn, and Paul's champion is Florida. So just to add to the magnitude of this game, for me, the future, the best bet, catching Paul Stone. If tiebreakers come into play, I can eliminate his champion. So this is a huge game. And I will say, look, you said it. I've used them now. This is the fourth straight round that I've used Auburn in this NCAA tournament. This is a team that if you just kind of lick your finger, test the win, and go, hey, like, who do you think's in better form? For some reason, I think there's still people that would say Florida, but it is Auburn that has covered three straight coming into this game. It is Auburn that has held three of its four tournament opponents under a point per possession on defense, and Auburn's been covering some pretty big numbers here. Florida, of course, I don't want to say lucky, but just barely gets by UConn, barely gets by Texas Tech. I don't know if this is a squad that is playing at its peak right now. And this team's treated me well. You know, they've been rolling pretty well on the defensive end. I'm really concerned about the shooting, but you do wonder if maybe they're going to snap out of it. Over four tournament games, they're shooting just 31% from three. Maybe in the Alamo Dome, this is the best spot to, like, get your shooting back. But at some point, a team that shot nearly 37% from three for the season, you would think, is not going to shoot under 30% for a game, which they've done in each of the last two contests. You would assume that Chad Baker-Mazara, who's only averaging 8.5 points per game, is really going to come on strong at some point here on offense too. So, look, I think this team's been underrated. And I think if you look at some of the projections, that would say the same thing. Some spots have this favored in Auburn's direction. Some spots have this just as a 1-point spread. I think we're just a little high on Florida here, so I'll take my chances and roll with the Auburn Tigers one last time, see if I can get there.
Auburn plus 2.5 is JVT's best bet in our Circa College Hoops Challenge. And as always, our best bets are brought to you by our friends over at G-Bank, the official bank of VSiN. G-Bank is up in the ante with a $750 bonus for new G-Bank Visa Signature Card customers. First new customers who spend $1,000 on eligible purchases within 90 days from account opening receive a $250 bonus. In addition, if you spend $50,000 on gaming and sports app loads within 30 days of account opening, you'll receive another $500 bonus. That's potentially a $750 bonus. So apply now, VSiN.com/GBank, VSIN.com/GBank. Subject to credit approval. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, before we get to Houston Duke, JVT, your thoughts on the total. This is a total, interestingly enough, no opposition, which makes me a little bit nervous. I played under 160.5. In totality, 8 of the 15 handicappers went under 160.5 in the contest. I don't know if that's a blind numbers play, if it's the arena, if it's the sight lines, if it's the familiarity. For me, JVT, was a little bit of everything. I feel like it's maybe a little inflated of a number. Florida has been incredible, going over, I think, in 11 straight games. What do you make of this total? Not a play for you, but just curious your thoughts on the total in Florida-Auburn.
Yeah, I do have an actual bet on under 160. So, this is a bet that I've made along with, I think it's 7 other handicappers in the contest who played it as well. I think everything that you've pointed out, I think this was pointed out by David Deneen, Ken Thompson with us yesterday on VSiN Primetime. I believe all 3 of the games in the Final Four last year, Final Four and Championship, went under the total. So you're getting a nitty-gritty time. Pace slows down. You're going to get a little bit more overcoached. You're going to get more half-court oriented games. So I think that's really going to play into this. as I mentioned, look, Auburn, the only consistent thing about Auburn throughout this tournament run has actually been their defense. They played very, very well on the defensive end. So if they keep that up, I think that's going to be there too. I think maybe that's probably coming into this somewhat of a familiar aspect between these two. Of course, they played back, what was that, February or whatever it was. They're conference rivals, so maybe that has something to do with it too. But I think all of that coming together, the neutral site, the shot lines, all that kind of stuff, I think leads to this potentially being a tad too high. So I gave it a shot as an actual bet, but like you said, didn't use it in the contest.
Yeah, so for me, two personal bets. I did bet under 160, 160.5 in the contest. I didn't get that hook, so hopefully that doesn't come back and bite me in the rear end. But for the contest, it is there. And then I also played first half under 76.5. We talked about that earlier in the show. And it is worth noting, super small sample size, but the only other 3 games played inside a football stadium, all 3 of those games went under at Lucas Oil, whether it was Kentucky, Tennessee, Houston, Purdue, and then Houston and Tennessee in the Elite Eight. Jonathan Von Tobel, at me, JVT, joining us courtesy of our progressive guest line. All right, let's get to the other contest, the Houston-Duke game. You're going to lay the chalk here with the Duke Blue Devils in the contest. 6 of us on Houston, 3 on Duke. You and Will Hill can make up some ground. Will can make up ground on me. You obviously can make up ground on Paul Stone. Was this pure game theory, or are you legitimately backing the Duke Blue Devils here at -5?
Yes, pure game theory. I went out and I scouted Paul Stone.
You did.
And, I found him on Jimmy Ott's podcast and listened to it and knew that he'd be on Houston. So I used Duke. Look, I do think that if you were to tell me, hey, pick this one side or the other, I lean a little bit toward Duke. I do think that Duke's offense has been tremendous. Their defense has been great. The overwhelming size that they're going to have at almost every position, I think, is going to really work in their favor. This is a step up in competition, and I think a lot of people would look at Duke and say, well, remember, they didn't cover against Arizona. Yeah, they were in control of that game against Arizona until a flurry of late shots allowed the Wildcats to get back into that number. I do believe in this Duke team to an extent. I do think that this is their tournament to lose at this point right now with the Final Four set. But this was some game theory when I found out that Paul was going to be on it. I just didn't know if he would use it as a best bet. But either way, like you said, going head-to-head with him really just comes down to the Duke game too. So it comes down to it with you and I as well. Yeah. I only lead you by 1.5 points for second place. So if Auburn fails me, then, of course, it's going to be nitty-gritty time when we come down to the Duke-Houston game, because that's going to be massive. But this was all game theory. I figured that Paul would be on it, and I played it. But I didn't have anything strong, and I'm hoping that this will help me at least maybe catch him. And who knows? If he goes 0-2 and I'm 2-0, I have a half-point lead going into the championship game.
Matt Humans put this together for us. This is the 3rd year, and the winner gets an option of $1,000 to Stadium Swim or $1,000 to Barry's. The runner-up gets $200 to our good friends over at Dom DeMarco's, where you and I have enjoyed the chicken parm. Yes. Tremendous. Very good. It was over there earlier this week. JVT, while I have you for a minute or two here, last night we saw the Lakers take care of business against the Pelicans. Important because they got 2 games coming up against the Thunder this week. But then the Warriors, man, this team continues to roll. 20-2 with Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry together. I believe the record since acquiring Jimmy Butler is 21-5 straight up. They beat the Denver Nuggets. Steph Curry's playing on another level. Right now, it's a jumbled mess there from like 3-8 in the Western Conference. What do you make of this Warriors team right now, and what are their prospects in your eyes come the Western Conference playoffs?
You know, it's hard not to start to believe in them, with their starting lineup that they used last night. I know the whole record with Jimmy Butler, but that starting lineup they threw out there yesterday, Tim, they are undefeated with that 5 out there. I believe they're 13 or 14-0 when they start those 5 guys together. So this is a team. Think about the stretch. This is what makes this most impressive. They just got done playing 3 games in 4 days. They played Memphis, the Lakers, and the Nuggets. All 3 teams that were ahead of them in the standings, and they beat all 3 of them and controlled a vast majority of all 3 of those games. This was a wildly impressive stretch for the Golden State Warriors. I am finding it hard not to gravitate toward them a little bit here. I have my questions still about how the shooting works out in the grand scheme of things in the best-of-7 series. But if you just look at them on paper, especially in a matchup with like the Lakers, look, they got the big-bodied wings to go ahead and handle a team like the Los Angeles Lakers, right? They have Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler for either Luka Doncic and LeBron James. They do present problems for the Lakers when you talk about having to hound Steph Curry along the perimeter and follow him everywhere. The Nuggets are a team that just vibes-wise, like I hear from people from Denver, this team doesn't like each other. It's all a nightmare behind the scenes. You kind of saw it last night with Jokic kind of sniping on the bench when they were falling apart in that game, over 20 turnovers. It seems that at the very least, if they can ascend all the way to 3 and avoid that OKC matchup in that second round, this team's got a really high ceiling to find its all the way to the Western Conference Finals. And look, I know I kind of poo-poo this, but in the Western Conference Finals between OKC, never been there, and of course the Golden State Warriors, a litany of guys who have been there and done that, it's going to be a really interesting dynamic should they make it that far.
Only a game back of the Los Angeles Lakers are the Golden State Warriors, and the Lakers have the hardest schedule remaining in the NBA. 5 games, a strength of schedule of almost 65% from a winning percentage. JVT, best of luck, sir, and we will see how the chips fall there for a lot in that Auburn-Florida game for you.
Yeah, I know. I can. I'll be on the air at 3 p.m. Pacific time if you want to watch me. So.
By the way, have we gotten can you take some shots of, like, tequila during the show?
I haven't gotten approval, but I will be.
All right, there you go. Jonathan Von Tobel, catch him later today. Live bet Saturday. Oh, he'll be sweating. That is for sure. It is the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.